My dress-up darling was probably one of the biggest surprises of the year. I already knew the source material was fairly popular, but it's not every day an ecchi anime gets this level of critical acclaim, and it definitely deserves it. Nuanced character writing, fun and clever dialogue, an impeccable production filled with gorgeous artwork, it's got just about everything that goes into making a really good rom-com anime. What I find to be most impressive, however, is its immense love for and understanding of niche hobbies and interests and how people engage with these interests on a social level. In general, the stuff that brings you joy in life typically doesn't involve a lot of anxiety or hardship. They're enjoyable for a reason. But when that particular interest doesn't line up with society's expectations of you, or is just frowned upon in general, it can lead to some less than desirable social situations. One of the very first scenes in Dress Up Darling throws this right in your face, with Gojo's cousin getting explosively angry with him over his love for Hina dolls because she views it as not being masculine, an event that may have subconsciously shaped a lot more of Gojo's personality than he realizes. It sucks being told that you're wrong simply for enjoying a hobby that other people don't approve of. It makes you more hesitant to open up to people, to be able to connect with them honestly. And since Hina dolls are pretty much the focal point of Gojo's personal life, he feels as though he has nothing that he can talk about to connect with others. And so he's wound up having no one to talk to at all outside of his own grandfather. He has become emotionally disconnected from others out of fear that what he loves will cause him to be rejected. And since Gojo sees this passion as being of the utmost importance to him, he simply chooses to go along with this isolation, a loner amongst a sea of otherwise fairly sociable high schoolers. Naturally then, the person most suited to play opposite Gojo in this series is Marin, but not wholly for the most obvious reasons. Yes, being extremely extroverted and able to make friends easily does set up some great contrast with Gojo, but what really makes Marin work is that, unlike Gojo, she is never shy about proclaiming her love for her own niche hobbies, those being cosplay and anime. In fact, one of the first scenes we see of Marin is her getting openly angry at someone who mocks one of her anime keychains. Her headstrong approach to life has made her thoroughly confident in her own hobbies. Therefore, she feels no need to hide them from the world or downplay her passion. So, when these seemingly polar opposites meet in the midst of Gojo trying to work on Hina dolls in private, Marin, rather than being grossed out or offended that Gojo would have such a feminine hobby, reacts with pure adoration, immediately praising Gojo for being able to do something she couldn't, and so deftly at that, thus leading her to ask if he would help with her cosplay. It's a pretty well-known writing tip that contrast is a powerful method for creating interesting character dynamics. The more different characters are, the more they will react differently to any given scenario, thus adding more variety to their interactions. Marin's social aptitude contrasting Gojo's social ineptitude is the most obvious, but these more basic traits are bolstered by their origins. One is confident in herself and doesn't get socially paralyzed by other people thinking her hobbies are weird, while the other thinks about this constantly and never moves forward. However, along with that contrast, it's also important to include something that unites them, something fundamental to both of them that they can bond over. In this instance, it's their immense passion for their respective hobbies that allows them to see past the social barriers that would normally keep these two apart, eventually spurring them onto a variety of situations with shocking amounts of well-placed characterization put into them. One of the moments that really sold me on how much this show truly gets this social dynamic is the lead up to Marin asking for Gojo's help. Earlier in the episode, when she helps Gojo clean up the classroom, Gojo acknowledges that his classmates are using him so that they don't have to help clean, which he seems fine with because he just wants to be useful, almost as though he's using it as a substitute for actual friendship, which Marin rightfully points out as an unhealthy way to live. You're not reliable if you just passively do whatever someone tells you to, You're just an object for them to use. You have to actually communicate with others and tell them how you feel. Contrast this with the moment when Marin asks Gojo to help with her cosplay. By this point, Gojo has already explained his love for Hina dolls to Marin, the first person he's expressed this love to in years. Not only does she accept his passion without hesitation, but she then feels as though she's found someone who she can share her own passion for cosplaying with, which they briefly bond over as Gojo critiques her work. It's only then that she asks for his help. Not as a faceless tool to use for her own benefit, but as a friend whom she can engage with on a personal level as they pursue cosplay together. Two different instances of Gojo helping other people, deliberately contrasted against each other to convey how important Gojo's agency is, and that expressing that agency honestly is incredibly important to forming stronger relationships. Just one of many, many examples of the wholesome and moving writing that this show is filled with. Dress Up Darling also displays its love for fandom and niche interests through its visuals as well. For example, special care is given to use the proper aspect ratio for whatever medium is being displayed. When Gojo and Marin are watching an older Magical Girl series, the frame is cropped down to 4:3, denoting that this series came out before the 16:9 standard took over. When we see examples of Shinju's photos, the frame takes on a 3:2 ratio, the most common standard for professional photography. It's not huge, but it does display that this show truly cares about what it's portraying. And of course, with this being an anime, it shows a love for the history of its medium through its use of references. The most interesting being this shot, which is a direct aesthetic reference to His and Her Circumstances, a rom-com directed by none other than Hideaki Anno that is considered to be one of the best in the genre and is certainly one that rom-com fans would be familiar with, as evidenced by Dress Up Darling not being the only rom-com this year to make that reference. It's a series that displays a truly deep love for its medium and its fans, creating something that conveys this sentiment whenever it can. My Dress Up Darling is a series about passion, but more importantly, it's a series about being able to express your passions to the world in an open and honest way, and how that openness can eventually lead you to develop strong relationships with others. It begs its viewers to proudly proclaim their love for whatever passion or hobby they might have, no matter how it might be viewed by society at large, because the individual connections you can make through that unashamed love is vastly more important to your well-being than being able to fit in to the big picture. It also acknowledges that, despite its importance, it's certainly not an easy task, especially when you're at that age where social standing feels like it's the most important thing in the world. And, admittedly, even I had this attitude for a lot longer than I should have. It seems almost impossible to believe, considering the image I've developed for myself by now, but I spent a lot of my life very desperately trying to fit in with the cool kids, and discovering that I was super into anime didn't exactly help in that regard. I tried to draw a line between myself as someone who just happens to consume a lot of anime, and the other fans that I found too embarrassing. I posted those cringe-ass memes about what the correct way to be an anime fan was. I was a connoisseur, not a fucking weeaboo. And I had only started using that word more often because it had been drowned in irony and backhanded approval by the time the late 2010s rolled around. I didn't want to be associated with them. And then, purely by coincidence of the YouTube algorithm, I stumbled upon a certain song that changed my perception of everything I just mentioned. That is Maria Issei in her Killua voice singing the opening theme to Hunter x Hunter. It's not a particularly brilliant cover. Sure, the hard rock edge fits Killua's brand a lot better than the original, and Issei's voice work is really solid, but beyond that, there's nothing especially interesting about this cover. And yet, I found myself entranced. I found myself remembering all of the awesome Killua moments throughout the series, in particular his emotional distress during Chimera Ant, and how he just breaks down at one point when he runs out of ideas on how to save Gon. It reminded me of everything I love about this character and why he's on my mind so often. By the way, if you follow me on Twitter, you probably have a very different idea of what I'm talking about, but we won't get into that here. To be honest, I'm still not entirely sure why it was this track specifically that spawned this attitude change. It wasn't even the first anime character song I had come into contact with. I was a fan of Mauve Iro no Sympathy from the Soul Eater character tracks way before this. But for some reason, it was this track that finally flipped the switch in my brain, leading me to accept my own otaku nature. And to probably no one's surprise whatsoever, it worked. Being openly passionate about my love for anime has attracted way more like-minded people than it has pushed away people who don't really get it. And even those people weren't huge obstacles to overcome. Whether it was at school, or at work, or through social media, way more people responded positively to me being really passionate than those who want to see me tone it down. It's stupidly obvious to say it out loud, but it's very much one of those things that needs to be openly articulated. I am an otaku. I get obsessed with different characters or different moments from dozens and dozens of anime and think about them constantly. My room is filled with anime figures, some more risque than others. At least half of my Twitter timeline is fan art of cute anime girls. Over half of my wardrobe is anime t-shirts. I have just about every kind of anime and anime-adjacent merch available, from plushies to keychains to art books to random trinkets and buttons and more. I have a fucking body pillow of Megumin from Konosuba sitting directly behind me as I'm recording this. I am a fucking weeb. Not ironically, not with my tongue buried so far in my cheek that it's burrowing through the other side, not with any amount of shame or embarrassment. Truthfully and wholeheartedly, I am an otaku. And I will proudly declare myself a fan of fanservice heavy shows like My Dress Up Darling, because I don't care if people think that's weird. It doesn't matter to me what people think about something that I love so dearly. Not anymore. I'm too fucking old to play these games, and thankfully, I don't really need to anymore more often than I expect. Anime has become such a massive global force that simply saying you like anime doesn't automatically elicit a disgusted reaction. Anime of all genres and topics are becoming more and more accepted in broader cultural discourse. Maybe one day we'll reach a point where it doesn't matter how weird or how ecchi or how dark or how whatever the anime you love is, or whatever passion it is that you take part in, and it can all just be accepted as something truly wonderful to enjoy. We're still not quite there yet, but just maybe that promised land is on the horizon. And people like Gojo won't have to hide the things they love and can just be accepted for who they are. Special thanks to Rourke Tenjoin, Chris Adili, Ryan Johnson, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.